As I ring the Tibetan bowl this morning, let the sound surround you. Relax as it slowly fades away, and give thanks that each of us is a part of the connective tissue that holds the legacy and future of our faith.
This is Chopin's Prelude, Opus 28, number 6.
Thank you, that was lovely. Well, good morning. Welcome, members, friends, visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River, and also those of you who are joining us on Zoom this morning. We're glad you're here with us. We come together as an intentional community, gathered around our mission to support each other's individual spiritual journeys and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more equal and just community. And we're glad to gather here this morning. I'm Nancy Holland, your service leader, along with Connie Schroth this morning, and we're pleased to welcome back Lika Lewis for her final of the 3 presentations this morning. As always, we're grateful for Michael and his music, Deb in the back, our tech team this morning, and all of those who make this service and every service possible. I have a couple of announcements this morning. First of all, Darlene has asked, she's in a rehab facility and she's hanging in there, let's say. They apparently have an outbreak of influenza A. So she's asked, no visitors, please, because she has it and a lot of the staff and people have it. So there is an address if you want to send a card or drop it here and we'll send them, that kind of thing, but please no visitors. Second, our auction, February 1st, that date's March 1st, sorry, yes, March 1st, but yes, February 1st, okay. So it's coming up fast, so please get your service donations or objects information to Jane. And also, Elizabeth Tully is coordinating the food for the auction. There is a sign-up sheet out on the whiteboard, so please volunteer to bring some sort of finger food, sweet or savory, for auction night. As most of you who've attended know, it's a really fun evening and tasty also. And then our final announcement, Catherine Brooks is going to speak briefly again about the stewardship event that's ongoing at the moment.
I always struggle with, do we call it a drive or a campaign or whatever, especially since we're still reeling from the last campaign. I want to congratulate the board. I asked them to step up as the leaders of the church, and they did, big time. We're already at 17% of our goal just from their pledges, and our goal is 74,000, so that's a big one. We've got week 2 coming up. Hopefully everybody got their pledge package. Either you picked them up or you got them in the mail. If you did not, please let me know. I have extra ones that I can hand out to you, or some of us misplaced them, so I'll be glad to give you another one. This is week 2. So hopefully now that everybody's got all their information, we can start to get those pledges in. There's a wooden box, lovely wooden box in the foyer that you can put them in, or you can mail them in. We pick them up, and that lets me total them up and see how we're doing every week. So we appreciate your contributions. The pledges are a huge part, over half of how we operate this church. So we need your contribution to support us. If anybody has any questions, say about the budget, proposed budget, I have a copy of those as well, if you missed the presentation last week. And you can also see it on YouTube. You can contact John Ramsey or David Beeler, and they will send you a copy or give you the link so that you could watch the whole thing. It was a pretty active discussion, as Unitarians are known to do. So it's kind of interesting to watch. Or if you have questions about the pledge campaign, or how do I figure out when my pledge should be, please let me know. Or my other committee members, that is Jackie and Joy Kim. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, again, contact me. My number's in the directory, my email's in the directory, as well as Jackie and Joy. So hopefully we'll see your envelopes in those boxes out there. Thank you very much.
Okay, and now if you will join me in the chalice lighting, the words are in your order of service. Whatever joy. Shared and passed through the generations, we hold the hopes of our ancestors. We add our own and pass them on. The chalices we light hold the promises we make to ourselves, to each other, to the world. That flame we light together cannot be blown out. And now please join me, rise as willing or able, for hymn 389 in the gray hymnal gathered here. Now this is usually sung as a round. We're going to give it a try. It's pretty simple. We will sing it through once together, or Michael can play it once, and then we'll sing it together once, and then we will break into 2 groups. The group over here will start, and the second group will come in where the number 3 is.
Halfway through.
Okay, but first play and then we'll. All together. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power. Spirit, draw near. This side, gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the Kurt. All right. Okay, so this morning, as I said, this is our final session of LICA's 3 discussions on the fates and how really they interact in our lives, or how we can include those. The third one here, we conclude with the third sister, Atropos, who determined how and when a person would die, and with her shears would cut the thread of life. So it's been interesting. You know how sometimes when you're buying a new car or something, all of a sudden you see the same make everywhere? Well, I've been running into the fates everywhere since these 3 weeks. So it's been on my list for eons to read the Iliad. So I finally started it. And the Greek hero Achilles is fated early on to an early death. So presumably the fates said that he would have an early death and that he would die at Troy during the Trojan War. So his goddess mother, Thetis, tries to protect Achilles by, as an infant, dipping him in the river Styx to make him invincible. But, you probably know the story, she holds him by the heels. And so the water doesn't touch the heels, thereby the Achilles heel, which is our supposed weak spot in our bodies, right? And then when the war breaks out, she tries to hide him so that he doesn't go to war. But he's found and he goes to war, and he tells early on that his mother had told him that there are 2 ways in which he could meet his end. So he actually has a little bit of choice here. If he fights at Troy, he will die, but he will be famous and his name will go down through generations. And the other option is to go home, and he will live a long but unrecognized life with no fame, no lasting recognition. So he's faced with that dilemma of deciding what kind of legacy he wants to leave in the world. And he chooses fame, and he does indeed die at Troy. And most of us aren't faced with such a distinct choice. We don't know the dates of our deaths. We don't know that, we've been fated. But we do have a choice about the memories and the legacy that we each leave behind. And we do have some choice in that, and I think that will be part of some of what we talk about today and think about. And then Connie will lead us in acknowledgements of the heart.
Well, I have to tell you, I would have stayed home. I would not have gone to war. That's not my bag. Let's see. This is the special time we save for sharing what we hold deeply in our hearts, be they joys or worries. I have to tell you, this is my favorite part of this service. I've gotten to love this part of this church. If you're joining us by Zoom this morning, please raise your hand or unmute to share what's in your heart. Those of you in person, please come to the microphone and I will light the candle for you. And I'll light the first candle for all of us who are dealing with tragedy and despair and confusion in the last couple of weeks for many, many reasons across the globe.
I have a concern. I haven't seen Mark in weeks. I know his car broke down, and it's very expensive, I think, to fix it. So I would like us to think about him, think about what we can do to help him to get him back here. He said to me at one point, I need my church. So we need to reach out to him.
I was just saying, I saw Mark on Friday. He's in his truck. He's parked outside the Bluebird. Now he's leaving, so I didn't speak to him.
Okay, that's a good sign, that he's out and about in his truck. That's good. And at the Bluebird, right, that's really good. Anyone else have anything they want to offer? Okay, thank you. So as we care for each other today, let us also care for this church, its mission and its programs. Please give as you are able, for our gifts keep the flame alive. Thank you, Michael. And now a reading by Leica.
This from Nikita Gill. Everything is on fire, but everyone I love is doing beautiful things and trying to make life worth living. And I know I don't have to believe in everything, but I believe in that. And so we come to the end. The final sister of the Morai, Atropos the inflexible, the one who cuts the thread of life. Now, Atropos is often depicted as an older woman, stern and unyielding. She's perhaps the least well-known and perhaps the least well-loved of the Fates. And you can kind of see why, right? The sister who holds death in the divine shears that she uses to bring that death to each soul woven into the fabric of time. The one who will not be turned aside by pleas or by compassion. She does her duty with as little heart as she has flexibility. Or at least, so goes one version of the story. It will not surprise you, perhaps, that I want us to look at Atropos with a different lens today. So what is it that makes her, just doing her job like her sisters, so feared and so reviled? There are mentions in mythology about the other two sisters, stories that make the challenges of their jobs clear, stories that give us an opportunity to connect with them a little bit more, to understand perhaps where they were coming from. But Atropos is only mentioned in a very few stories. And in those stories, it underscores this inflexibility that she has, this unfeeling, unyielding nature that she has been given in myth. I think there are three things that make it likely, that make it in history so that she has been so misunderstood and so feared. I think one is that we see death as the ultimate loss of control. Two, we see death as the end of writing our story and the beginning of a legacy that is now outside our control. And 3, especially, we see death as the enemy. So first of all, the loss of control. I saw a mention one time, and I will admit it got my toes a little bit, that said that oldest children are often particularly challenged by death because it's such an ultimate loss of control. We grow up helping our siblings figure out life, helping make sure that everyone follows the rules, etc. And then this big unknown comes along, and we can't fix that at all. And I wonder if this idea that the way that Atropos is described sounds familiar to you. Let me give it to you with very slightly different language. The inflexible divine who will not be turned aside by pleas or by compassion, but will deliver people to their fate, perhaps eternal peace, perhaps eternal punishment. Does that sound familiar at all? Of course, versions of this story appear again and again in religions throughout history. And I think it's partly because a binary, especially when life is hard, can feel really familiar and comforting. It can make us feel like we have control to say, oh, that person must be sick because they did something wrong. And so if I do everything right, then I will never have to face such an experience. So humans, I think when life is hard especially, have historically understood painful times by gravitating to deities who offer that illusion of control. But I'd like us to consider another concept of the divine, of fate, of life. Our liberal Christian siblings offer us this concept of process theology, which I'm not a Christian, but I have to say I do like the idea of process theology. And for those who may not be familiar with it, process theology is the idea that God, or the ultimate deity, is not this all-powerful, removed, unyielding force, but is a more approachable one, specifically is one who grieves alongside humans at injustice, and is one with whom humans can co-create a path forward into a more just future. And I have to say, I really like that. Now, it is absolutely true that death is full of unknowing and uncertainty. We don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know how we will experience it in most cases. But that's to that second point, is this really the end of writing our story? I love, this is probably one of my favorite readings of all time, and some of you may have encountered it. It's called The Physicist's Eulogy from Aaron Freeman, and I just want to read you just a short snippet of it, or a couple of short snippets. I couldn't decide. I was like, cutting, and I wanted to keep the whole thing, but I didn't want this to be too long. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that every particle, that all your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping parents that amid the energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And at one point, you'd hope the physicist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse there in the pew and tell them that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by your smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your spouse rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the physicist let them know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are their eyes, that those photons created within them constellations of electromagnetically charged neurons whose energy will go on forever. And I love that idea. And I love this, related to that, I love the idea that if we could go far enough out in space, then we can look back at any point that from a distance in space, those who have passed on outside of this phase of existence are still here. That those who are yet to come will be here already. That all of the existence that has ever been is here in different moments of time, yes, but also all true from across the universe. I think that, yes, death is the end of perhaps one chapter of our story, of writing our story. And yes, perhaps it is the beginning of a legacy outside of our control. We may never feel like we're leaving or living enough. But what, if we knew the end, if we knew what the end was, I'm sorry, lost my place. If we knew what the end was, what would we do differently? Now, I've heard that question asked so many times in life. And usually the point of that question is, repent now, be saved now. Hellfire and brimstone preachers might ask that one way, but I'd like you to hear it with a different inflection. If we knew the day and the time that we would be leaving this plane of existence, what would we do differently? What would we change about what we would want for our legacy that we wouldn't also choose for the way we connect with each other? Because that ultimately is the connection. I was looking up, went down a weaving rabbit hole, as one does when you're talking about the fates. And I found this really interesting idea. So you've heard, of course, the quote about the arc of justice or the moral universe bending. And I found this interesting fact about weaving. And that is, if you are going to weave a curve, there are a couple ways you can do it. But one of the ways is you can thread the curve through the strings and then keep on weaving. That is a way that does produce a curve, but it produces a curve that is unstable. It produces a curve that can shift. The way to create curves that will stay is to knot the thread at the end, to knot and cut the thread. And so all of the knots in all of the threads that have been cut throughout history are contributing to the weaving, not just in the texture, as we talked about before, not just in the colors and the changes, but also in the curve of justice, in bending the arc of history toward a better future. And so when we get to the point where Atropos might cut our thread and not it, our legacy does not end, but continues as a knot in the foundation of the curve of justice. And finally, death as an enemy. And I want to name here that it is important for me to recognize, to say out loud, that we need all of us, and that each of us will make the fabric of time and space and justice as strong as it can be if we stay as long as we can. And it is not death, this change of phase, of chapter, of shift in the story. It's not the enemy. Atropos is depicted as inflexible and unyielding. And as I worked on this sermon and as I thought about that, I thought, it is not Atropos. Again, approaching this with a process theology lens. It is not Atropos, perhaps, that is inflexible, that is unyielding, but time. And as I considered that, I thought, I love the indigenous understanding of time. For those who may not be familiar with it, the First Nations, many believe that time is more of a circle. That just as across the universe we can see all that has existed, also all exists within the circle of time. One of the writers I was reading said, I don't understand Second Nations or European concepts of time as linear, because time is this circle that is constantly creating and renewing and going around and around. And so I thought, time is both the ultimate inflexibility, but also the ultimate flexibility, because it offers us a chance to be a part of something that will continue to create and renew and create and renew. And that cannot happen without each of us being a part of that infinite circle. The legacy that we consider is not ours individually. It is a legacy that we collectively weave together, a spirit of life and death. But like the family in Aaron Freeman's eulogy, may we also draw comfort from the fact that the energy we brought to life and to the work goes on. So how do we then want to be remembered? How would we choose if we could know? I think it's the same way that we choose every moment of every day, how we connect to each other. That is how we build the legacy that we collectively weave. And so then how do we remember Atropos? Let us not remember her as this inflexible, unyielding, unfeeling, grim reaper who comes in the night to separate us from all we love. Perhaps, just like her sisters, and just like I at least hope one day that I will be remembered with some nuance, let's offer her a more nuanced legacy as well. One of a warm presence who will one day say, "Come, beloved, let your end be woven into the story that still continues." And may we together weave it so. remember this time. Any questions or comments? Thank you so much.
Discussion, if anyone? Harry?
We're talking about energy and people's energy. Energy can't be destroyed. It might be transformed from one form to the other or interchanged between matter and energy. The big thing isn't that energy exists, it's what we do with the energy. The same energy that cooks your food and makes your steel and your products in this world also is capable of burning down the houses in California. So it's not that we have energy, it's how we use the energy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I love your reworking of the idea of the Grim Reaper being a friend, a tender presence. And I will say in hospice that we all joke around that the transition team comes and that most people who have a slower path to death are not alone. Like they are talking and looking and interacting with the side that we can't see, whatever that is. And there's a peace that comes across their face that is undeniable. So the idea that we lose control in that moment, I think actually we gain it. We gain the understanding of how loved we are, how supported we are, and that Grim Reaper is really just to help you separate from this side because nobody likes change, right? So it's a who moved my cheese moment, and that Grim Reaper is really just to help that transition. And you see it over and over again in hospice. So as a 52-year-old woman, I don't think about the fear of dying. My only concern is, am I going to get the right meds? And are they going to keep me comfortable, right? That's it.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot of people say that. It's not so much the fear of death, it's the process and being in pain or that nobody wants, obviously.
I guess I was trying to wrap my mind around the tying the knot to keep the to maintain the curve.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, I don't weave, so I'm having a little trouble with that. But wouldn't the curve then be more of a sine curve in a weaving as it goes from thread to thread, or am I missing something?
No, so the way that it works is you slide the curve through and then knot it and tie it. And then with that knot, then it holds the curve stable as you weave around it. If you continue, so it is possible to just continue with that thread and do the weaving with the thread you made the curve. But then it starts to flatten the curve a little bit more. And so you don't get that steady and stable curve. Yes.
So when it's tied, is it tied to these threads?
Yeah.
Aha, so it's not a freestanding knot, it's tied stable on one of the threads. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, the knot, which, honestly, I think is the way that life works as well, right? The knot of our life is wrapped around the threads that we have touched. And that is where,
Speaking of warp and weft.
Yes.
Those threads.
yes.
I kept thinking of how difficult it is to make the heel of a sock,
Yes.
to make it come out right. And that the curve works there too. It's the same symbolism.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's, reassuring that this scientist, this physicist's endorsement that energy doesn't dissipate or disappear. But I think that when I think about death and what might, not only what the aftermath of that is, but also what really animates us.
Yeah.
What is that thing that somehow gives us not only thoughts but feelings and choices and such? It's not a measurable form of energy. It's energy, for lack of a better description.
Yeah.
But it's something else besides electrical energy or matter or whatever. When we die, that alternative form of energy, which I guess as of late is being identified as consciousness. Not awareness, but just consciousness.
Yeah.
And there are even scientists that are finally yielding to say that everything comes from consciousness, a universal consciousness. And that may be thoughtful and may be personable. We don't know that. But it's something more than just volts and watts and such. It's what gives us our sense of being alive. It's of our personalities, of our interactions, of our choices. And I think for lack of a better name for this specific type of energy, I would call it either magic or mystery.
Yeah.
And at one time, that was highly respected for thousands and thousands of years until the scientists got a hold of it.
Well, as someone who identifies as a mystic humanist, let me try and bring these concepts together. Because as you say, there is absolutely a spark to life that is not measured in volts or BTUs. And if we get to the point where we have answered everything and we have no more questions, most of the scientists, I think, I would say all scientists, but I'll leave the possibility of some outliers. I think all scientists would just be crushed to have no more questions to investigate. And so, perhaps one day we will also be able to say that with science we understand that spark of life is also not lost or created, that maybe I have not generally, as is classically understood, included reincarnation in my theology personally. But maybe that is something that we will realize, is that energy, the energy that right now we can't measure with science, maybe that energy also is not created or destroyed, but continues moving around the universe, perhaps appearing in, the sense of humor of the descendant 6 generations on. I don't know, but I don't think that science and mysticism or learning and mystery or magic are really all that far apart. I think they're just ways that we are using to make some way of understanding something that we can never totally wrap our brains around.
Kudos, by the way, on managing to have one sermon that incorporates process theology and the ancient Greeks. That's an intellectual achievement.
Thank you.
If I remember process theology, and I may not be,
Yeah.
their description of reality is a series of experienced events, and their definition of experience is very broad. It goes beyond just the personal, includes even the mineral and the botanical.
Yeah, okay.
But I would emphasize the word experience, and when you talk about knots, the tying of a knot is a volitional act, and is something that is, I would argue, an experiential act. And I guess my question, concern, comment, whatever, is when you're referring to the length of the thread,
Yeah.
especially in this day and age, and especially as we have debates about quality of life issues and about hospice, I think we also should focus on the ability of a person to tie their own knot.
Absolutely.
And not just focus on length. And I'm not a weaver, but I'm a carpenter. And I can tell you half of the art of carpentry is knowing what to cut.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am a very strong proponent of choice in all of our bodily functions, including what the end of this phase of bodily function looks like. And so absolutely, dignity in dying, strong proponent of laws that will allow more autonomy across all of our life processes, including the end.
Oop, John again.
I would say if we ever get to the point where we have no more questions, then we have the answer wrong.
I would agree.
I like
My parents lived in a retirement community for several years, and I would visit them very often. And when a member of the community died, they placed a lovely photo of that person with the announcement of their death on a lovely wooden table. I passed it many, many times. And then all of a sudden I looked up and realized the table was placed underneath an exit sign. And I said to my mother one day, "Mom, do you realize that that table is under an exit sign?" And she said, "Oh, yes, everybody knows, but they keep it right there." And I said, "Oh, okay, fine." And when my mother passed away, her photo was on that table with an announcement. And I laughed, and I thought, I'm sharing a moment of laughter with my mother at this moment, but it was just so amusing that this is where this table was placed.
Yeah. I love that idea of sharing another joke. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to swap things a little bit because I wanted us to end with singing Spirit of Life together.
Please rise as willing and able for hymn number 123 in the gray hymnal.